I had a guy ask me if I could take £20 draw weight off his Warbow, which is not really my bags, and it didn't look that nice anyway. So I pulled out one of my staves and I said, well, I'll make you a £100 at 30-inch longbow, and if you want it you can have it, and if you don't, you don't have to. Someone will want to buy it. But here's a nice illustration of just roughing out the stave early on, cutting from each side on the bandsaw, and you'll notice it's got this sort of ambiguous sapwood where it's sort of dark and light, but it's much less heartwood one side than the other, which is why you sort of cut it out as in two goes. So once I established the shape of the back of the bow following that sapwood, then we can mark it out better. There you can see it's sort of the curve of the stave, so it probably wants to sit a bit like that. Anyhow, I'll rough off this top point with my draw knife, establish a fairly clean back. We'll clean that up and start roughing it out, see how it goes. I'm removing this ridge down the back, and it'll give me an idea of how the sapwood feels. I feel that's cutting in lovely and smooth, and this is the only way you can tell if the sapwood's any good. If it feels nice and smooth and creamy, then, to use a cheese analogy, feels like a bit of Edam or cheddar and not like a bit of crunchy old parmesan. I don't know if you can see the various growth rings. It just gives me an idea of how I'm getting down to not necessarily a single ring, but at least a sort of even layer. So I'm just trying to clean up the back, and that will be a reference point for where the bow wants to sit. You can see how quickly it comes off. I mean, power tools are great for initial roughing out, but often hand tools are just as quick and give you better control and feel and more exercise. This is English Yew. I think this came from my mate Rob. The feel of it tells you that it will make a decent back for a bow. And if you do find your sapwood's too crunchy or rotten or no good, take it off and back the bow with a bit of bamboo or something. Great tool, the draw knife. Lets you work quickly, but also quite delicately if you want to. Now it's interesting here, you can see the slopes much more. The sapwood's obviously dipping there, or the heartwood's dipping, or the stave's twisting. I can see why it looks so funny there. So you've got a big knot here. It does look a bit nasty. I can leave extra sapwood there, but maybe just lay the bow out a bit nearer this edge. That's why we rough out, really. Let's just see what we've got. Now we've got an interesting feature here. You can see there's been something's damaged that whole growth ring, whether it's disease or something rubbing on it that's then been cut away and it's grown back over. That could be nasty, but we're fairly near the end of the bow, so I can always lose some length off this end, or as I narrow the bow it may disappear because it doesn't show this side, so we'll have to see. But that's the thing with wood. Even the most perfect looking stave, when you get into it you'll find areas that you don't know what's happening. But you've got this black stuff, that was obviously like bark that's rotted away, same as you get on a knot. So that will get looked at. But I'm already beginning to shape the bow a bit. You know, I've removed some of that area. It's looking a lot better now. Trying to establish the back of the bow, so instead of sitting like that, it sits like that. So some of this corner needs to come off. Just adjusting the orientation of the stave so it sits how I want it to. But here you can see the pith line. That was the centre of the log or branch or whatever it was. So I'd guess it was probably about this sort of diameter to start with, which is quite reasonable. It's what you want. You don't want to start with a massive tree trunk, but on the other hand, something too small becomes just like a stick bow. Right, you can see I've taken off a fair amount of that sapwood. It's now a fairly homogeneous layer. I mean, it's not obviously growth ring followed or anything, but you can see there is some twist down the length, but not enough to be of great concern. Written on it, the remnants of Aug 2019. So August 2019. Now, whether that's when I got it and stuck it on the shelf or when it was cut, I don't know. Probably when it was harvested, but regardless of that, it's had plenty of time. Pretty straight, so what I can do is run a string line down it, trim it a little bit more to shape, get some of the thickness off near the tips here, remove some of the bulk in case it wants to shift, then start thinking about where I want the grip. I've put a string line down the centre, biasing it slightly over to this side to try and get us away from this rotten ring or whatever it is. I've marked it sort of basically 40 millimetres wide along the whole lot, narrowing slightly to 30, but this is just an early rough out. It's amazing how much things can change when you remove just a very thin whisker of wood. So what was a nasty looking dead knot near the middle is now much less worrisome, and that nasty black manky ring has also disappeared to a great extent. You just can't see what's going on inside the wood till you cut it. The general quality of the wood's looking nicer now. The sapwood's looking a lot cleaner. It's all just starting to look very nice.